Hello, horror fans, and welcome back to the Script to Screen podcast, where we delve in to the spine tingling world of horror cinema. Each week, we look at the scariest scenes, unmask the deeper meanings behind your favourite horror films, and explore the psychology of fear that keeps us coming back for more.
From script analysis to scene breakdowns, we'll be dissecting your favorite horror movies to see what makes them tick. So, whether you're a seasoned horror aficionado or just starting to explore the genre, join us as we unravel the spine tingling stories that haunt the silver screen.
As always, I'm Will, and I'm here with Lee. Now, before we get into the nitty gritty this week, Lee, how's things? Have you watched anything good?
I've actually started watching a TV show called From, like FROM. It's quite
Oh,
not many people have heard of it, but I've heard nothing but good buzz of it, and I kind of binged season one in like 3 days. It's so good. It's so good. It's kind of like if Lost was sort of rated R rated for horror. It's even
no.
got like Harold Perrineau, who's awesome in it, from Lost. But it's amazing. It's so good. I'm kind of jealous I didn't think of the idea myself. It's such a great idea. Great concept, fairly low budget, and it's just got like infinite potential. I don't want to go into too many details about it, but I highly recommend it. So yeah, I definitely recommend checking it out.
Fantastic. Sounds really good. Sounds really good. Yeah, I haven't actually seen much. Obviously, I've been away for a few weeks, so I didn't really get much time to watch anything whilst I was away. But I did obviously have a little look at the film that I think we're doing next for our next episode. But what I did do is buy a few DVDs. So I bought some Peter Hyams DVDs,
Okay.
some of his films that I missed, and I also bought some John Sayles DVDs. So some of the films that I've missed from his back catalogue as well. So I'm looking
Oh,
forward to watching
brilliant.
those.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So what are we looking
Fun.
at this week? What's up for dissection?
Well, Lee, this week on the dissection table, and I've been looking forward to this one, it is John Carpenter's The Thing. So, based on the classic short story Who Goes There by John Campbell, and a remake of sorts of the Howard Hawks classic The Thing from Another World.
There's a popular theory of a perfect film, meaning like a film that couldn't really be improved upon in any way. And I think John Carpenter's The Thing is a perfect film.
Oh, it's high praise indeed, Lee.
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit I'm somewhat biased here because this is probably my favorite movie of all time, but I will try and go into this with an open mind.
Yeah, try and keep your mind open, Lee. Try not to let that bias kind of seep through too much to your
I'm gonna fail
to your
miserably, but I'll
dissection
try.
this week. Okay, so The Thing, what a banger. So released the 25th of June 1982. The Thing is widely regarded as a masterpiece of horror cinema and arguably Carpenter's best work.
Hmm. I mean, John Carpenter hit so many home runs in the 70s and 80s, but I think this is definitely his magnum opus. I think only the original Halloween comes even close to it.
What a series of bangers this guy had. I mean, like you say, those 70s and 80s films of his were
Mm.
just unbelievable. What a run. So, anyway, we're focusing on The Thing today. So, the film shot for 40 days on a soundstage and 17 days on location, and thematically centers around the loss of identity, where characters transform into something alien to themselves.
So all your classic horror themes, fear of death, fear of the unknown, and Snyder would say this is a classic monster in the house scenario.
Very much. Now, the script we are looking at today is the second draft, written by Bill Lancaster, and it's dated the 4th of March, 1981.
And it weighs in at a hefty 121 pages, so we have a lot to get through.
Better crack on then, Lee. Better crack on. A group of researchers stationed at a remote Antarctic outpost encounter a terrifying alien life form that can mimic any living being it assimilates. As paranoia spreads and trust breaks down, the team must uncover who among them is still human before the creature consumes them all. In winter of 1982, these men were commissioned by the United States National Science Foundation to gather data concerning the physical and natural sciences on the continent of Antarctica.
So before we get into the screenplay itself, we have a very brief page of character bios and a quick explanation, as Will has just read out to you, of why the characters are actually out there in the middle of nowhere.
So, this is from the script. And it goes as follows. The main compound of US Outpost 31. The interior is a cramped and never ending maze of hallways, passageways, and doors which connect the many rooms and compartments within the compound. Sturdy but prefabricated materials have been used in its construction. There is a laboratory, an infirmary, a kitchen and mess hall, a communications room, and sleeping quarters. Other cubicles are for storage and supplies. The most spacious area of the building and the main center of activity is the rec room. Of the many entranceways to this room can be seen the small work chambers with their sophisticated computers and other scientific equipment. The below quarter houses the generator and still other compartments for storage. A long underground tunnel connects the main compound to the dog kennel.
That's a really cool little just brief description they've given us of the of pretty much the whole location of the film, bar a few scenes.
Absolutely, really sets the scene.
Mm.
So the first shot is exactly as written, an alien spacecraft streaking through space before crashing into Earth. Then we get that iconic burn-in title card, which was designed to mimic the look of the original Howard Hawks film. To achieve this effect, an animation cell with the words "The Thing" was positioned behind a fish tank filled with smoke and covered with a plastic garbage bag. When the bag was set on fire, it created the illusion of the title burning onto the screen.
Boom, that iconic Morricone theme kicks in. I just want to take a second to appreciate how good the soundtrack is on this movie and how well Ennio Morricone intentionally imitates John Carpenter's infamous synth style.
Oh, it's absolutely fantastic and really sets the tone for the film, I think. Really does a great job. So, unused music composed for this film by Morricone was later repurposed in Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight, which was from 2015. Interestingly, Morricone's score for the thing was nominated for a Razzie Award for Worst Score, whereas his work on The Hateful Eight earned him an Oscar. Strange but true. The film itself was considered a flop at the time of release and panned by audiences and critics alike. With an estimated budget of $15 million, it struggled to rake in a little over 20 million at the box office at the time.
Man, that pisses me off so much. I mean, I think people just weren't ready for this film at the time. You know, they wanted E.T., and instead Carpenter just kind of went straight for the throat and did not let up. If I had a time machine, I think I'd go back in time and give John Carpenter a hug when everyone was like just shitting on this masterpiece.
That's what you do with a time machine?
Yeah, after rewriting season 8 of Game of Thrones and killing Hitler, yeah, that's what I'd do with a time machine.
Well, laudable stuff. Anyway, the script opens proper in the icy desolation of Antarctica. A helicopter hunts a lone sled dog across the icy wastes. The two men aboard, desperate to kill the animal. According to Carpenter's commentary, this is not actually the famous Jed, the sled dog used so effectively later in the film, but a stunt dog painted to look like Jed. We're shown a quick overview of the camp and introduced to Macready, who, after losing a game of computer chess, destroys the machine. I can sympathize.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great piece of character work as well. I mean, Macready would rather destroy the game than admit defeat. You know, if he's going to lose, he's going to take the whole system down with him.
Quite right too. That's how responsible adults act. This will come into play again in the movie's climax. Incidentally, the female voice on Macready's computer was performed uncredited by then wife of John Carpenter, Adrienne Barbeau.
The only woman in the entire film.
It isn't going to pass the Bechdel test for sure.
Yeah, I guess you can't stereotype something that just isn't there.
That's quite right too. Quite right too. Good tactic. You say about this being a perfect film, Lee. Don't you think it could have been improved by having some female cast members?
You know, that's actually a really good point. But I don't know. I mean, I think if it was reshot today, then absolutely, yes. The 2011 prequel featuring the awesome Mary Elizabeth Winstead in the lead role was pretty good. It was decent. But I think if you were to suddenly add a woman into this 80s dynamic, it would probably hurt the film. It's kind of like saying, I don't know, the Descent, Neil Marshall's The Descent would be better if some of the cavers were men. You know, it wouldn't.
Yeah, I guess you just have to accept the classics for what they are, right?
Yeah, I think so. And the chopper pursues the dog straight into US Outpost 31. Now, in the script, Norris and Bennings are the first to see the helicopter. In the movie, it is MacReady emerging from his shack, whiskey in hand. MacReady, of course, is played by cinematic icon Kurt Russell.
It's a good change up, I think, to introduce us to the leading man first and foremost. The commotion draws out Charles, Norris, Bennings, and Palmer. In the script, the men are in the process of releasing a weather balloon.
Norris lets us know that the chopper is Norwegian and the occupants resort to grenades in their mission to kill the dog before coming into land. Norris is played by Charles Hallahan of Dante's Peak, The Fan, and NYPD Blue fame.
Ah. So in the script, the chopper comes in too fast and actually crashes with only one survivor.
Okay, so I know I said this was a perfect movie, but if I had to change one thing, it would be the scene where the chopper pilot fumbles a grenade and then blows himself up trying to retrieve it. It's just such a derp moment. I can't help but laugh at it every time.
It is a bit silly. I think the crash would definitely have played out better. I imagine at the time, and where this was filmed, it was just too hard or expensive to kind of crash a chopper safely or convincingly. Anyway, angry Norwegian starts to scream at the men and takes more shots at the dog, injuring Bennings in the process. Bennings, played by Peter Maloney, who would go on to feature in, amongst other things, Requiem for a Dream and Summer of Sam.
It's kind of a shame that none of the crew speak Norwegian, as the gunman is clearly stating, "Get the hell out of there. That's not a dog. It's some sort of thing. It's imitating a dog. It isn't real. Get away, you idiots."
So I think the film would have ended slightly earlier if they understood that the cries from the Norwegian. It would have made a much shorter film. Just like in the script, the gunman is put down by station leader Gary and his trusty revolver. Gary is played quite wonderfully, I think, by Donald Moffat, who you may have seen in The Right Stuff and Clear and Present Danger. The crew extinguish the burning chopper as Clark, the dog handler, sees to the wounded animal. MacReady, who has yet to be introduced in the script, throws out a brilliant line.
First goddamn week of winter. I love that. We have a quick scene of Dr. Copper stitching up Bennings, which plays almost word for word to the script. Although the script does have an additional shot of Clark working on the dog's bullet wound. Clark is played by prolific Richard Masur, who you may have seen in Risky Business and My Girl, to name just a few.
Next up in the radio room, and Sanchez, known as Windows in the film, and Blair are unable to reach help in a scene lifted almost straight from the script. Blair, of course, is played by real life cowboy legend Wilfred Brimley, best known for his role in Cocoon.
The crew discuss the Norwegian camp. The only real difference from the script is the estimated crew number. There are 6 on the page and 10 in the film. Dr. Copper wants to check on the Norwegian camp and recruits MacReady, who is salvaging kerosene from the wrecked chopper.
Now, in the script, this is where we meet or first meet our hero engaged in a battle of computer chess, which occurs a little earlier, as we said, in the film itself.
Yeah, and in the script as well, MacReady is far more reluctant to take the chopper up. And I guess this could have translated as him being somewhat cowardly. Maybe that's why it wasn't filmed. And what do you reckon?
Difficult to say. I mean, it could be. I think MacReady, certainly in the film, he has this kind of no bullshit kind of pragmatism to him. So it may be kind of a character beat that they felt wasn't necessary. But I agree, though, you don't want your hero appearing too kind of cowardly too early in the film.
Yeah, and just before they take off, we get a really cool shot of the dog just kind of listening from under the table.
So while MacReady flies the chopper to the foreign camp, we get a fantastic shot of the dog prowling the hallways. More on that later. This scene doesn't occur for another 7 pages in the script and ends with an obvious attack, although the target is still unknown.
Yeah, it's Norris.
Is it?
Yeah, in my headcanon, it's totally Norris. Although when Carpenter shot the scene, he didn't actually use any of the actors for the silhouette so as not to give away intentionally who it was.
In the meantime, MacReady and Copper arrive at the Norwegian camp, which, to quote the script, resembles the aftermath of a Western fort sacked and ravaged by Indians. Interestingly, the Norwegian camp scenes were actually the charred remains of the American site from the end of the film. Rather than build and burn another set, Carpenter simply reused the destroyed American camp. Dr. Copper, of course, is played by the brilliant Richard Dysart.
There are so many fantastic visuals in this scene. You got the bloody fire axe, the frozen blood, the hole in the ice. And interestingly, in the script, McCready goes back for his shotgun in the chopper after seeing just how bad things are, whereas in the film, he kind of has it from the outset.
Yeah, I mean, this whole scene is a masterclass in tension and active questions.
Yeah, in the script, it's kind of diluted with a couple of cheap jump scares involving a Playboy magazine and a severed arm.
Yeah, definitely right to cut them out, I think. Any jumps here would have just ended that tension immediately.
Absolutely, absolutely. We end with McCready and Copper discovering the funeral pyre, which incidentally is the first thing they find in the script.
I can see why they changed the order. You want to end on a high note, not start with it.
Yeah, absolutely. McCready and Copper head back to Outpost 31, and the creepy ass dog watches them again through the window as they land.
Oh, there's something about that dog. Something about that dog, Lee. We then get our first proper look at the thing as the crew inspect the charred remains brought back from the foreign camp. I love the way the camera sort of pans around the remains, teasing us with little glimpses of this kind of organic mess, while most of it remains in shadow.
It's the looks on everyone's faces that gets me. It's kind of dawning on them that they are fucked, but as yet they have no idea just how fucked they are.
And the damn dog, Lee, just stood there watching the whole thing.
Have we mentioned yet just how effective this canine actor is? He was a half wolf, half Malamute breed named Jed, and apparently when filming, he never looked at the camera or the crew members.
Worthy of a canine Oscar, that's for sure. We have a quick scene of Gary and Windows where it's made clear that there's no way to call for help. This scene occurs a little earlier in the script, but is pretty much verbatim. Windows is played by Thomas Waits.
Yeah, I'm gonna say probably the end of Act One is here. You could make an argument for the upcoming dog scene, I guess, but I think if they'd never found these remains, the dog thing may have just decided to remain hidden as it wouldn't have been under threat.
Yeah, I agree. I placed it here too. This is, it's a classic first act climax.
Next up is a nicely gruesome autopsy, followed by some scenes of the crew relaxing. These are cut differently from the script, mostly shot as written, just out of sequence. Although we do lose a scene of Childs tending to his marijuana garden.
Ah, well, it's a long old winter out there.
Yeah.
So Clark locks the strange dog up with their own sled dogs. It's another fantastic performance. This dog is just so alien.
Oh, it is, isn't it? It's so creepy, so creepy. And this is where everything hits the fan. The thing shows itself for the first time and attempts to assimilate the other dogs.
Now, there are a few minor differences. In the script, Clark is woken by McCready and told to check on the dogs, and the encounter itself is far bloodier. The dogs are intent on destroying the thing and have to be pulled away from it rather than fleeing.
I mean, how great are the special effects here? How awesome, hideous, and horrifying does this look?
It is it's pretty gross, but I love some of the ways they achieve some of the effects in this sequence, which we can get into later. But there are little moments which really amp up the horror of this sequence, like one of the dogs biting the wire fence, kind of just desperate to get out of this cage.
Dan Winston actually did the thing effects for this scene, and he refused to be credited so as not to take away from Rob Bottin's amazing special effects work. And I think that just goes to show what a visionary and just all-round class act Stan was.
Ah, true legend of the screen.
Amen, brother. But let's take a second just to acknowledge the absolute genius of Rob Bottin, who also worked on such iconic movies as Legend, Total Recall, RoboCop, Seven. I could keep going for ages, Fight Club. I mean, the guy worked himself into the ground doing this movie. He was hospitalized at one point with exhaustion, bless him.
Oh, I mean, it was amazing work, and I think he was only like 22 when the thing was made, so it's unbelievable. So 10% of the movie's budget went on the special effects, and every penny of it shows on screen. So back with another autopsy, this time of the dog thing. We get some fantastically gruesome effects here, followed by some critical exposition about the nature of the thing and how it absorbs its prey. Blair then performs some blood tests on the surviving dogs, and it's here that you can really see that paranoia is starting to set in, Lee.
Yeah, I mean, he has a great dialogue with Clark, which is clearly meant to insinuate that Clark could be the thing. The scene is not present in the script until later, when it plays out pretty much the same.
The crew watch the recovered footage from the Norwegian camp and see them blasting something in the ice at a location about 4 miles from their camp. In the script, it's MacReady who watches this footage in his shack whilst inflating a blow up sex doll, which pops up for a cheap jump scare later in the screenplay. MacReady flies out to check the mysterious site and finds both the UFO from the opening scene and the spot where the thing was extracted from the ice.
Good, so good. Notice how Norris is never left on his own with MacReady here.
True, Norris does kindly let us know that the ship has been buried in the ice for over 100,000 years, giving us more of an inkling into the near immortal nature of the thing.
Whereas back in camp, we get a nice little recap of what has happened and where we are in the story. Knowles tosses in someone's shredded long johns that have been dumped in the kitchen.
That's going to be important later.
Yeah, I mean, Blair is clearly the only one who realizes just how bad the situation is. And this is exacerbated by the next scene in which Blair runs a computer simulation with some epic early 80s computer effects that
Brilliant.
drive home the fact that the thing can imitate anything it kills perfectly.
If the audience hasn't picked up on it by now, there is no hope.
Speaking of no hope, the computer tells us that there is a 75% chance one of the crew has already been assimilated. To make matters worse, the computer tells us that if the thing reaches civilization, it will wipe out humanity in 27,000 hours.
That works out to 1,125 days, or 3 years and 1 month.
Ouch.
Ouch indeed, Lee. Ouch indeed. Meanwhile, it's dawning on MacReady just what the shredded long johns implies as Bennings and Windows move the alien remains to the storeroom. It's made very clear to the audience that the remains are still alive as Bennings is left alone with it.
Fuchs asks to speak to MacReady in private. Out in the snowcrawler, he tells MacReady that Blair has locked himself in his room and that the alien remains aren't dead yet.
Shame he didn't mention that to the two guys he left alone with it a little while ago. This scene isn't in the script, although we do get a scene of poor Blair trying to persuade Gary that the station must be quarantined, to no avail.
Yeah. Windows returns to find poor Bennings mid-assimilation. He runs for help, and the crew hold an impromptu Bennings barbecue out in the snow. This is missing from the script. After this, MacReady and the others burn everything related to the thing, but of course, by this point, it is already too late.
Indeed, indeed it is. MacReady catches a glimpse of what looks like Blair sabotaging the helicopter. He checks it out, and indeed, there are down one chopper. To make things worse, gunshots. Back in the radio room, Blair is freaking out. He's laid waste to the radio and left Windows a little worse for wear.
Yeah. In the script, they trip a fuse box and tackle Blair in the dark, but here they just wait till he's expended all his ammo and then they bum rush him with a table/shield. Poor Clark learns that Blair has killed the remaining dogs in a scene that's not present in the script. You'll see why in a moment. As a brief side note here, there's a really cool element from the original novella that was never included. In the sort of said novella, nobody actually destroys the radio, as if the crew don't check in regularly, a rescue team would automatically be sent out and dispatched. So they have to fake that everything is all right in regular check-ins.
I see what you mean. There could have been some really cool scenes played off of that.
Yeah, potentially. I think so, yeah.
So, with Blair subdued, the crew lock him in the external tool shed and sedate him in a scene which plays largely as it's written. MacReady and some of the crew then gather outside to discuss their predicament. MacReady lets everyone know that he believes some of them may not be what they seem. Let's pause the film for a moment here, Lee, as
What follows in the script is the biggest deviation that we've seen from the film so far. Rather than being killed, the surviving dogs escape or were freed, and MacReady, Childs, and a still alive Bennings set out in pursuit on souped-up snowmobiles, and it isn't long before they've come across some remains.
the men kneel down by something. It is the half-eaten remains of a dog, its hind legs and lower stomach picked clean. its ripped hide flapping in the wind, its top half missing. Charles, what is it? MacReady follows the line of continuing dog tracks. MacReady, maybe dinner? Bennings, dogs don't eat each other. MacReady, beat. I know. Charles, where's the other half? MacReady, probably the next meal. MacReady moves to the snowmobile and grabs a 2-gallon can of gasoline. He turns to Bennings. MacReady, where are these tracks headed? Bennings, nowhere, just straight to the ocean. A beat as MacReady takes this in. He pours the gas over the remains and sets it aflame. MacReady, let's move. Charles and Bennings are not that anxious to continue. Charles, they could be hours ahead of us, Mac. Bennings, gonna get dark soon too. Supposed to be 50 below tonight. MacReady gets in and revs up the engine. MacReady, turn back if you want. Charles and Bennings return shrugs. So the pursuit continues into the night until the 3 men reach a series of icy bluffs, and it is here they find a dog. It sits, its back to them, unconcerned, heedless of their arrival. It is munching on the other half of the dog carcass. The men stop their machines some 20 yards from it. They are hemmed in at the valley's narrowest point. Charles, carrying the torch, and MacReady, armed with a thermite bomb, wade awkwardly but carefully toward the animal in their snowshoes. Bennings stands back by the snowmobiles. Charles and MacReady spread out some dozen feet from the dog. It continues to pay them no mind, content to chew its food. Charles, where's the other one? Bennings surveys the top of the snow bluffs that encircle them with his flashlight. MacReady, to dog, where's your buddy, boy? Huh? No response. MacReady searches the near vicinity with his light. All 3 are growing uneasy. MacReady, continuing. Let that thing fly, Charles. Don't let up until he's ash. Charles turns on the gas and lights the tip. Bennings is still watching the bluffs. Something from beneath the snow reaches up and grabs his feet. He's ripped back down through the hard snow in one incredibly powerful motion. He screams, his head the only thing sticking out of the ice. Charles and MacReady turn confused, unable to see anything but Bennings' screaming head. They rush towards him. MacReady stumbles. The sound of a snapping and crackling to MacReady's rear. He freezes, turns back to the dog. Its back is still to him, its coat of hair sticking up like that of a porcupine. It snarls, its face turns slowly towards him, its skin spitting, its mouth ripping open wildly. MacReady, Charles! Charles stops, confused as to who to help first. He notices the dog haunched and ready to spring. He steps back towards MacReady. The dog thing leaps for MacReady, an incredible jump of some 20 feet. Charles lets loose a blast, hitting the dog in midair, the force of the spray knocking it back and tumbling to the ice and flames. MacReady throws his thermite canister. It discharges and engulfs the screeching animal in fire. Bennings, howling in pain, the ice underneath him thrashes violently. Charles and MacReady stand by helplessly, unable to see what has him or what action to take. Charles moves closer to help. MacReady pulls him back. Stay back! Bennings' head disappears with a sudden jerk through the ice. The ice continues to rumble like boiling water, moving in different directions. Part of Bennings' body pops up in a different area, and it's just as quickly pulled back down. MacReady and Charles watch on in frustration and anger. Charles, what do we do? MacReady, how the fuck do I know? Bennings' head and shoulders then surface near one of the snowmobiles. Something has him, unclear as to what. The jowls of a dog? But huge. Bennings' heavy clothing begins to rip, tear, as if his skin underneath was bulging out. The jowls seem to be absorbing his head. MacReady runs for the snowmobile. MacReady, torch them! Charles, but... MacReady, he's gone already! Do it! Charles blasts away. The ice begins to melt as Bennings and whatever has him catch fire. A screeching. MacReady grabs cans of gas from the snowmobiles. Suddenly, a steel-like arachnid-shaped arm shoots out in pain, and with incredible force, pierces the fiberglass chassis of the snowmobile. MacReady is knocked back. He recovers and dumps cans of gasoline on the writhing mess. He dives and rolls away from the lunging appendage. He and Charles watch on as Bennings and the thing roar in flame. Behind them, the other dog thing continues to burn. The screeching, mewing, and gurgling wails on all about them. They look to each other in disbelief, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. The strident sounds beginning to subside.
That's such a cool scene. Why do you reckon they cut that?
Well, it's difficult to know. I mean, I think it's a big action set piece. It involves snowmobiles. It involves sort of flames, multiple characters. There's practical effects. Could just be a budgetary thing.
Yeah.
It could be that it sort of extracts them away from the compound. And I think, the tension is so focused on them in the compound and the drama and the interplay between the characters. It could just be that it drew it away and sort of stopped the tension.
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it there with both of those. I think the only other small point I'd say is like if the snowmobiles like work, someone might say, well, why don't they just take the snowmobiles and go, But
Just drive to the ocean.
yeah, someone would. Well, someone if I was there, I'd probably just be like, yeah, nope,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
out.
true.
Have a snowmobile,
Yep.
much fuel as I can carry, and just like head off.
Yeah, screw
But
you guys.
or alternatively, like the thing could do that as well, you know.
That's
So,
true. Very true.
but yeah, I think you pretty much nailed as to why they didn't film that. It's definitely one of those two reasons. In the script at the moment, the group interrogate Clark, who denies releasing the dogs. And there's also a really cool line about how Dr. Copper believes that they became assimilated after swallowing chunks of the thing during the kennel fight. Because don't forget, in the script, it's a lot more brutal. The dogs are literally trying to tear the thing to pieces. They're not trying to escape. They're trying to just destroy it. And that's where the scene ends with the doc suggesting the blood tests. And then we're pretty much bang in sync with the film.
So at this point, someone or something, Lee, has
Hey.
sabotaged the blood supply, rendering Dr. Copper's proposed test useless. This scene was shot as written and ends with Windows freaking out and dashing for a gun. Why is he referred to as Windows on screen, but as Sanchez in the script, by the way?
Legend has it that Thomas Waits arrived on set. This is the actor who plays Windows. He was arrived on set wearing sunglasses and just requested everyone call him Windows from that point on. And John Carpenter was like, "Yeah, fair enough."
Yeah,
And
nice.
so a legend
Yeah.
was born.
Why the hell not?
Man, the paranoia is everywhere now. These men literally they have nowhere to go, no one to trust, and you can see all the past resentments just bubbling to the surface now.
Keith David and Richard Mauser apparently decided that as the two largest men in the camp, they would be openly hostile towards one another and played the roles as such. Let's take a little secondly to talk about Keith David.
Oh, brother, I would happily talk all day about Keith David.
Yeah, so talk about a prolific career. If by some chance you don't recognize the face, Mr. David is one of the most prolific voice actors of the modern era. So you'll definitely recognize his gravelly tones.
And he will always be the true voice of Spawn in my ears. Poor old Windows grabs a gun, but the others catch up to him before he can load it. Gary threatens to shoot him, but McCready manages to talk the situation down. And it's a really cool scene as Station Commander Gary relinquishes his gun and with it his authority.
So if Norris is the thing, why didn't he accept Gary's offer of command?
That's a really good question. There are some hints dropped in the script that those assimilated by the thing don't know it until the moment that the alien actually takes control. That could be one explanation. Another is that it's just doing what it thinks Norris would do to blend in.
Well, either way, it's here that McCready officially steps up to take charge.
Another point mentioned in the script is Norris is continually nursing his chest, and this will factor in hugely just a little later.
McCready and the others gather outside to burn what remains of the blood bags. McCready orders Copper, Gary, and Clark to be separated, restrained, and sedated.
Oh man, I mean, he's chosen the three most likely to be imposters. Frustratingly, he is wrong on every count.
So, who do you think is actually the thing at this point, Lee?
At this point, it's just Norris and Palmer. It's possible Blair has been assimilated at this point, but if not, it's definitely within the next 2 days.
Norris drugs up the three men as Charles stands guard.
We get a really, really cool monologue from McCready as he clarifies some information for the audience into a tape recorder. It's also a nice way to note the passage of time. It's been 48 hours since the storm hit, so these men have been cooped up with the thing for 2 days since we last saw them.
We also get the fantastic line, "Nobody trusts anybody now. We're all very tired."
Man, it's just like the 2020s in a nutshell, isn't it? And it just sets the tone perfectly for the film as
It,
well.
it does set the tone. It really does. So McCready checks in with Fuchs. The way the latter grabs a flask of acid and then forces himself to be calm is just another great little on screen moment. The scene follows the script closely here, but that little moment is missing. It also harks back to the dogs ingesting parts of the thing as the reason they should eat out of cans.
The power dies, and Fuchs chases a mysterious shadow outside, only to find McCready's shredded clothes dumped in the snow.
Oh my goodness. An hour later, McCready has organized the men to search for Fuchs, who hasn't returned. The men clearly have their suspicions about one another, and tensions are running high. McCready demands they meet back up in 20 minutes. Now, in the script, McCready has already set an alarm to go off at 20-minute intervals, and anyone not meeting in the rec room will summarily be hunted and killed, Lee.
McCready does not fuck about, does he?
No, he does not. No, no, no. He checks on Blair, who seems much calmer and relaxed. He wants back in, but McCready is having none of it. Blair says, "I promise, I'm much better now. I'll be good. I'm all better. Don't leave me here." I love this scene, Lee. I genuinely love this scene. Like, Brimley is fantastic here. And there's something in his dialogue and his delivery. And the fact that there's a noose in the background really tickles me, makes me laugh every time.
That's because Blair isn't Blair anymore.
He's not. When did it happen?
Well, sometime in the 48-hour period, I'd wager. I mean, you see the noose next to him, as you mentioned. Blair was willing to die rather than infect the others or risk being infected. And now all of a sudden he's changed his mind and once in, yeah, he's totally infected.
Interesting. Interesting. McCready and the others find Fuchs' burnt remains outside. So what happened here?
Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, as McCready says, something either torched him or he torched himself before it could get to him.
More active questions.
Never to be answered.
So what happens to him in the script?
When the script, Palmer and Childs find him impaled on a door with a fire axe, whilst they're torching Childs' marijuana garden.
Oh, why do they torch the weed garden, Lee?
It's something about plants being organic, so they're kind of worried that they could maybe be imitated by the thing. And obviously, Childs is not happy about it.
No, I can imagine. I can imagine. During these scenes in the script, someone has sabotaged the generator. So the compound is plunged into darkness, and there's an against the clock element. As if it isn't restarted in time, they will literally freeze to death.
Life or death, man, life or death. On screen, McCready and Knowles go to investigate McCready's shack as somebody has left the lights on.
Oh my goodness. 45 minutes later, and an ailing Norris spots someone approaching from outside and alerts the others.
And it's Knowles. He's found McCready's shredded clothes in his shack and cut him loose in the blizzard.
It's pretty much word for word to the script here. They refuse to let McCready back in, and he smashes his way into the supply room where he threatens to blow everybody to hell with a wad of dynamite. Everybody backs off until Niles and Norris jump McCready from behind. He fights them off, but Norris goes down hard and he's stopped breathing.
Yeah. The doc is untied and Norris is plopped onto a table for some CPR. There's a really cool shot of Clark palming a scalpel before Norris's chest caves in and bites off Doc's arms, and the proverbial shit hits the fan. Interestingly, a double amputee wearing a Doc Copper mask was briefly featured in this shot just to get it right.
Pure chaos as McCready torches the emerging thing, but unnoticed, Blair's head detaches from the body, grows spider legs, and scuttles away.
You gotta be fucking kidding me.
Ugh.
This is the movie's holy shit scene for sure.
So, just for listeners who haven't encountered this, Lee, what's a holy shit scene?
Okay, so I believe all the best horror movies have a holy shit scene. It's kind of the scene that sells the film. and it's the one that people will talk about for years after. Alien, for example, has the chest burster scene.
Of course. Interestingly, most of this is missing from the script. Norris's body begins to mutate and is promptly torched. It's here where Macready notices that parts of the thing have liquefied to try and escape the fire. The doc survives, and there's no Spiderhead at all.
Man, it's hard to imagine the movie without that iconic scene in it.
I know,
Uh,
right?
yeah. The crew assemble in the rec room where Clark tries to get the drop on Macready and pays with his life. And this scene is pretty much as it is in the script.
Now, next up is what could well be classed as another holy shit scene, the infamous blood test. This plays out largely as written, but with one major difference in that it is Doc Copper who is taken out by the thing instead of Windows.
Yeah. A couple of things about this scene. Interestingly, the poster behind Macready in this scene is for an STD campaign, and the slogan on it, "They aren't labeled, chum," illustrates that this whole movie could well be an analogy for the AIDS epidemic that was all over the news at the time.
Certainly fits the whole "it could be anyone" motif and ties in nicely with the infected blood idea. What else?
Okay, this is cool. When watching this scene, note that everyone's eyes reflect the light with the exception of one.
Palmer, who is, of course, not Palmer at all. The newly revealed things are torched, and the survivors conclude the testing. Everyone is human. I just have to shout out to poor Gary, who has one of my favorite lines from the entire movie here. He's strapped to the couch and he says, "I know you gentlemen have been through a lot, but when you find the time, I'd rather not spend the rest of the winter tied to this fucking couch." That's so funny, man. The delivery of this is classic.
It does genuinely make me laugh when I think about it. I
He
mean, in
does
the
drop an
script,
F-bomb,
yeah,
which isn't in the
yeah.
script. Sorry.
The F-bomb isn't in the script, but it makes it, doesn't it? I mean, in the script, the line is met with laughter from the group. It's kind of used as a tension break, just to kind of let everyone breathe after all the moments that have just
Yeah.
happened. But unfortunately, then they remember about Blair, who they've locked out in the tool shed. And I reckon this is where we move into Act 3. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree.
So Macready leaves Childs on guard duty, and he, Gary, and Knowles head out to find Blair missing and a hastily constructed UFO under the ice.
As this is happening, we cut back to the compound to find Childs has vanished. Macready and the others blow up the ship just as the power is cut. They realize they have no hope of survival now. It's just a matter of whether the thing lives or dies.
Nice. Now in the novella, this is kind of where the story ends. They go down there, but instead of finding a spaceship, they find kind of like a anti-gravity backpack with Blair kind of strapping on, and they just kind of kill them both, and that's kind of it. Everyone lives happy ever after, which makes for a pretty lame ending, I think. So I'm glad they kind of added everything else. But anyway, in the script, they are chased back to the main structure by an unseen screeching thing in the snow.
Now, also in the script, it is Macready who blows the generator in order to lure the thing to them. He also hands out cyanide pills, assuming the thing won't want them if they're dead.
Guess that's something you just keep on scientific expeditions. So
Hmm.
fair enough. Back on screen, the three men set about destroying the compound to lure out the alien. With Outpost 31 aflame, they head down into the generator room.
Now, in the script, the last stand plays out a little differently. The survivors split up and try to funnel the thing into a confrontation, but it uses the speakers to play deafeningly loud music to disorient them. Windows is taken by the thing, but manages to bite down on his cyanide pill before Knowles is forced to leave him behind and loses his capsule in his hasty retreat.
Back to the screen, the survivors descend into the generator room to find it quite literally gone. And after committing horror movie sin number one, splitting up, Gary and Knowles are picked off by Blair.
The thing comes, tremor style for Macready, before emerging in its final form, an amalgamation of all its previous incarnations. Macready takes it out with a stick of dynamite, but the camp is in ruins. The burning wreckage will keep him alive, but not for longly.
As Macready settles down to his fate, Childs reappears. The two men agree that neither are in a position to attack the other and settle down to die.
Before we take a closer look at the ending, how does it compare to the script?
Well, in the script, Thing is a lot more proactive in hunting the men down. Gary is caught by the thing and electrocuted by MacReady before he can be assimilated, kind of a mercy killing kind of thing.
Mm.
And Knowles, having lost his cyanide pill, has to resort to somewhat more desperate means.
Yeah. So this is from the script. Interior compound hall. The distant sound of a motor. Knowles, battered and bloodied, his leg apparently broken, crawls along the ground. Another sound, a bubbling and gurgling, is heard well to his rear, but closing. The terror forces him to drag faster, oblivious to the pain. He reaches the bathroom stall, crawls in, locks it. The gurgling nears. Leaning on the toilet seat, he looks about himself frantically. The presence pauses at the door, a scratching. Knowles' paws rips at a cracked and weathered slab of wood, cutting his fingers as he tries to break it off the siding. A strong blow begins to breach the stall door. Knowles finally unhinges the piece of wood, brings the jagged end to one side of his throat, and rips.
I wish that was that film. That's such a cool scene. Such a
Oh,
cool scene. I don't think
brutal.
we even see him die in the film, do we? He just kind of
No.
wanders off and
Mm.
gets an on off-screen death. Is there a worse way to go in a film?
Uh,
Off-screen death. Well, in the script, MacReady demolishes the building basically by driving a tractor through it and blows up the thing with hydrogen tanks from the weather balloons. And the film ends with him and Charles both suffering with severe frostbite, settling down for a game of chess before the temperature drop kills them both.
so, yeah, pretty similar in the end.
Yeah, I mean the core is there. I mean, like everything else that was cut or unfilmed, I guess it revolved around cost and keeping the visuals isolated.
So the ending, Lee, was either man the thing?
Well, it's left intentionally vague. I mean, you're not supposed to know. John Carpenter has never sort of confirmed or denied. He wants you to just not know, basically.
So I guess we'll never know.
Well, if you look at the prequel and the video game adaptation, it tells us what happens after the film and if Charles has been assimilated.
Go on.
Well, in the prequel, it is established that the thing cannot copy inorganic material, such as tooth fillings and jewelry.
And Charles still has his earring.
Exactly. Also, in the video game, which is considered canon by John Carpenter, MacReady was revealed to be the sole survivor of Outpost 31. So technically, the question has been answered, but personally, I think it's better if it isn't.
Yeah, I think so. I have to say, I'm a huge fan of the film, or of films in general, not giving its audience all the answers, you know. It gives people something to discuss as they're leaving, but also, you know, film is a subjective medium and there should be room for interpretation. But, you know, what a film, Lee.
Man, it's so good. I never get tired of watching it, ever. So, like, what do you think is the scariest moment of the film?
Okay, so for me, like the scariest scene in the film is actually Jed the dog prowling the corridors. So we mentioned it earlier, but there's something about this moment which is both amazing technically, but also really chilling. And for me, it all comes down to the way this dog moves. The way he pauses at the first door, but doesn't really look in. He's looking to the second door. Then he moves there and pauses again. And as you mentioned, he doesn't look at the camera as it dollies back. It's unbelievable. It's just so alien. So for me, this is, you know, the best performance, honestly, like the best performance I've ever seen by an animal in all of cinema. I've not seen anything better. And interestingly, in the script, the identity of the silhouette was revealed, but there is another note and brackets asking for the reveal to be cut.
I love that. I love that when we get scripts and there's just like little notes of like
Oh, it's
little
wonderful, isn't it?
snippets of history in there. It's just so cool, so cool, and that is such a great scene. It's probably, to be honest, it's probably my favorite too. But in the interest of variation, I will go with when MacReady and Coffer explore the Norwegian camp. I mean, that whole scene to me is just a masterwork of active questions and tension. It delivers some
Mm.
unforgettable visuals, and it just leaves it to the audience to try and piece together in their mind what happened.
Yeah, amazing stuff. So last time we looked at a script from Shane Black, has a very individual style. What are your thoughts having read through this Bill Lancaster script?
Well, it's much more traditional, so to speak. There are no rules broken here, no fourth wall breaks. It's also very tightly written. There's no real fat to trim. Everything has a purpose. One thing Lancaster does well, and it's a really good thing to keep in mind, is he almost always has his characters doing something in his scenes. Everybody is constantly in motion, even if it's like a trivial action in almost every scene. Before anybody speaks, we are told what the characters are doing, then they speak. I think this helps to give agency and authenticity to their words. I've grabbed a couple of examples just to kind of show you my point. Childs runs up, out of breath. Childs, he got both the choppers and the tractor. I don't know how bad yet. Gary readies his large 357 Magnum. McCready, no, wait a minute, to Norris. The fuse box. Norris double times down the hall. I mean, just everyone is in motion. Everybody's doing something.
Yeah,
Another
absolutely.
example. Norris shuffles the bundle of notes Dr. Copper brought back with him. Norris, seems they were spending a lot of time at a place 4 miles northeast of their camp. Gary, what were they involved in? McCready, working on the video machine, answers. Little ice core drilling, some seismology, glaciology, same old shit we do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great examples, you know. Everyone's doing something, everyone's in motion, you know, it's also character beats, right? It sort of says something about their character. So it's really great examples. Yeah, for me, I think when I look at Bill Lancaster's scripts in contrast to Black's, we can really get a sense of how a script can sculpt the tone of a finished film. Although these two films have different target audiences, and they are both ostensibly horror films. Black Script has a much kind of lighter comedic tone, which translates wonderfully into the finished film. With The Thing, Lancaster brings a much kind of straighter, no nonsense, kind of dramatic tone, and it's very kind of pragmatic, almost kind of blue collar. And I think that really translates into the finished film as well. So it's very much focused on the drama. And I think the interesting thing I was just going to sort of throw in is if you look at how Carpenter shot the film, it's not expressionistic at all. It's kind of very level kind of cameras. You know, there's not a lot of strange camera moves. The lighting is very pragmatic and practical. So there's nothing, I think it really influenced how Carpenter actually went about shooting it as well. So the takeaway here for me is that just to be really conscious of the tone of your story and align your writing as much as you can for that tone. I think if you do that well, it can permeate through the entire project and really influence what the film becomes. So as you mentioned, Lee, the script starts with standalone character introductions, and I assume this is because of the ensemble nature of the cast. But what did you take from the way the characters are introduced here? And were there any introductions that embedded within the script that caught your eye?
Yeah, I think like you said, that was done out of a necessity to have the reader up to speed as quickly as possible, because the script literally hits the ground running. So I suspect it was done as kind of a reference. So if at any point the reader is confused as to who's who, they can just kind of flick back to that page and instantly be caught up. As for introductions, to be honest, as everyone is almost piled on screen at once, the only significant character introduction I think is McCready. Although I guess you could make an argument for Gary murdering a guy as one hell of a first impression as well.
It certainly is. So what did we learn here, Lee? What did you sort of learn from this?
Well, I think this is a perfect example of doing things by the book. I mean, it's literally a textbook script, and yet it's such a fantastic read. As I mentioned just now, I think this shows the importance of character actions, giving your characters something to do in a scene. Just don't have them standing around talking, have them always be doing something. And if you can kind of relate that to their character, then all the better. I mean, what about you?
Yeah, man, I think that's great. I mean, I keep banging on about tone, but I think, it's this script, if you read it, is a great example of, how your writing style can really influence the tone of the finished film. So the words you're using and the manner of your descriptive passages can really spark the imagination of your collaborators. So, when you're writing yourself, I guess it's really try to be very clear about the tone of your story and then point everything towards that. Okay, well, that's about it for this week. So tell me, Lee, what's on the agenda for next time?
Okay, so next week we're going to be taking a closer look at Bad Moon, aka Thor, and we'll be comparing it to the 1996 shooting draft written and directed by Eric Red.
Now, I wasn't familiar with this at all when you first kind of mentioned it.
It's a delightful little 90s creature feature, and it kind of went under the radar back in the day. So hopefully we can shine a bit of a spotlight on it now.
Oh, I can't wait to dig into that one. Okay, so it's time for a little bit of self-promotion. So if you enjoy the podcast, please hit like and subscribe. And of course, go and check out our socials as well.
Yep, we also have links to the scripts that we've looked at in the show notes. And as always, the scripts we use are property of their original owners, and we're using them here purely for educational purposes.
Fabulously. So there we go. There we are, listeners. That's The Thing. What a banger. Lee's favorite film of all time. It's definitely in top 5 for me. So until next time, folks, do take care.
And keep writing those scares.